The magic realm is a world where magic exists and is used freely as part of everyday life. It is believed to be a divine gift, and one's mastery of it determines their social status. However, in a secluded part of this world deep within the forest, there is someone whose very existence defies this natural order. After finishing his workout, Mash enjoys a cream puff. Regro lives with his son in a remote forest far from other people. Now that he is older, he no longer lets many things bother him and has learned to deal with stress. Mash then enters the house, accidentally ripping the door off its hinges. Regro gets angry and scolds him, but Mash casually explains that he forgot whether he needed to push or pull. He apologizes and says he will fix it. Regro calms down, but when he sees Mash trying to force the door into place incorrectly, he gets frustrated again and yells that it's in the wrong position. However, Mash keeps pushing until the door is completely destroyed. After Regro settles down, he asks Mash if he has finished today's training. Mash confirms but questions why all his exercises are physical. Regro wants to tell him the truth that he is different and cannot use magic, but decides to save it for another time. Regro then heads outside. Mash mentions that he has figured out how to fix the door, but Regro yells at him to learn how to open and close doors properly first. Before leaving, Regro reminds Mash that he must not go to the city. However, as soon as Regro departs, Mash sets off toward the city, unable to ignore his hunger. Upon reaching the city, he notices that everyone is using magic for things they could do with their hands. He stops at a cream puff shop and orders 7, but in his excitement, he accidentally bends the coins. He quickly apologizes and straightens them back to normal. The vendor is shocked but still sells him the cream puffs. As Mash is about to leave, a gust of wind blows off his hood, revealing his face. The people around him immediately notice that something is missing. Meanwhile, Brad reads in the newspaper that this year's Divine Visionaries, Rain Ames, a second-year student at Easton Magic Academy. The title of Divine Visionary is awarded to the student who demonstrates the highest level of excellence throughout the school year. Along with this honor, Rain is elevated to nobility, granted 1 billion land, and offered a provisional position at the Bureau of Magic. Brad, stuck in a dull place living a dull life, feels envious. A battered, chained man pleads with Brad for mercy, insisting he only stole something small. However, Brad is irritated, as the man's crime caused him trouble and forced him to work. As he prepares to make the thief regret his actions, the phone suddenly rings. Brad picks up and is informed about an unmarked child spotted in the city. As Mash walks through town, people continuously stare at him, noticing the absence of a mark on his face. While wandering, he accidentally bumps into a drunk policeman, Terry, getting cream on his uniform. Outraged, Terry yells at Mash, who then offers him a cream puff. But as it's half-eaten, Terry becomes even angrier and smacks it to the ground. He keeps shouting, demanding to know how Mash will make up for his ruined uniform. In response, Mash simply grabs the uniform, rips it off Terry, and states that he will wash it. Hearing the commotion, Brad arrives and sees Terry causing a scene. Spotting Mash, he suspects that he might be the unmarked child from the report. However, before Brad can question him, Regro rushes in, quickly apologizing and pulling Mash away. Seeing an opportunity for a promotion, Brad conjures a magical bird to secretly follow them. Back home, Regro scolds Mash for disobeying him and going to the city. However, noticing Mash's genuine regret, he softens. As punishment, he orders Mash to redo his morning training. Mash accepts and hands Regro some cream puffs. As Mash heads out, Regro hurries to open the door for him to prevent further damage. Now deeply concerned, Regro realizes the magical police know about Mash. Looking outside, he notices Brad's bird. Moments later, Brad, Terry, and another officer smash through the wall. Meanwhile, Mash completes his training quickly and walks back, humming a song about cream puffs. Reaching the door, he hesitates, unsure whether to push or pull, but stops when he overhears Brad inside. Brad, confident that Regro is hiding Mash, declares that their society thrives by eliminating inferior bloodlines incapable of magic. He claims those without magic have no right to exist. Demanding Mash's whereabouts, Brad warns that sheltering an unmarked person is a crime. Regro stays silent, even as Brad begins beating him. As the assault continues, Regro recalls his past, how his family and superiors saw him as worthless due to his weak magic. Feeling unwanted, he had once resolved to end his life. However, just as he was about to jump, he heard a baby's cry. Realizing the unmarked child had been abandoned, he saw himself in the infant. When the baby smiled at him for the first time in his life, Regro felt needed. He vowed to be the boy's father. Snapping back to reality, Regro desperately yells at Mash to run. Brad, realizing Mash must be close, orders his men to find him. When Regro refuses to talk, Brad escalates the beating. Just as he prepares to use magic, Mash bursts through the door, punching a policeman and sending him flying through the wall. Terry steps up next, but Mash immediately rips his uniform off again and begins slapping him repeatedly, knocking him out. Watching this, Regro wonders why Mash didn't escape. Mash explains that Regro is his only family, and he couldn't leave him behind. Apologizing for being selfish, he declares that since he's here, they'll send the police straight to hell. Brad laughs, doubting Mash's ability to win without magic. Terry agrees, recalling that Brad was once part of the Bureau of Magic's security force far beyond the level of an ordinary magic user. Confident, Brad boasts that he will end the fight in 3 seconds and begins casting a spell. Terry recognizes it as the same magic that once repelled a dragon. Brad launches anicaps, a destructive magical sphere, creating a massive explosion. As the smoke clears, Brad is stunned Mash had merely slapped the spell away as if it were nothing. Frustrated, Brad prepares an even stronger attack, anicapped Diagorus. Yet, once again, Mash effortlessly swats it aside. Brad repeatedly fires, but Mash counters with a volleyball move, juggling the magical spheres in the air as if playing with them. Mash then picks up Regro's wand, casually saying he'll borrow it. Brad, surprised since Mash has no magic, hastily summons a defensive barrier to block any magical attack. However, Mash hurls the wand like a spear, piercing through Brad's magic shield with ease and grazing his face. Stunned, Brad has never seen anyone use a wand in such a way. Mash coldly warns him never to threaten his family again, or he will kill him. Brad, realizing Mash's raw strength, suddenly changes tactics. He proposes an offer if Mash follows his orders. He will spare him and regrow. Brad explains that once a year, one exceptional student is chosen as a divine visionary considered one of God's chosen. If Mash enrolls in a magic academy and earns that title, it would mean society has no choice but to accept him. Brad admits he only wants the prestige and fortune that come with discovering such talent. However, if Mash refuses, the entire country will hunt him. While Mash himself might survive, Regro won't. Understanding the stakes, Mash accepts the deal. He turns to Regro and reassures him he just wants them to live in peace again. Easton Magic Academy is a renowned institution that has produced countless pillars of the magical realm. Its entrance exam is notoriously difficult, admitting fewer than 3% of applicants, selecting only those with exceptional magical abilities. Claude Lucci observes this year's candidates, recognizing some as noble heirs and children of influential figures. However, his attention is drawn to Mash, who is casually pumping iron. Shocked that someone would be weightlifting before a magic exam, he is even more baffled when he sees Mash performing the invisible chair while reading a fitness book instead of a magic tome. Spotting Regro and Brad poorly attempting to hide, Claude ultimately dismisses Mash, assuming slackers like him will inevitably fail. Claude then steps forward, revealing himself as the overseer of the exam. The students immediately recognize him as a formidable magic user, and their admiration boosts his ego. To demonstrate his abilities, Claude summons desks, placing test papers and feathered pens on them, impressing everyone except Mash, who bluntly states that it would have been easier to take them to a prepared room. Annoyed, Claude gives them 30 minutes to complete the exam. The candidates quickly realize the challenge the questions are wriggling around chaotically. Claude had enchanted the test papers, requiring students to dispel the magic and align the questions to proceed. Regro and Brad assume Mash has no chance of passing. However, Mash simply glares at the paper and commands the questions to stop moving. When they don't listen, he crushes his feather pen, repeating his demand. Terrified, the questions immediately freeze and arrange themselves properly. Mash hands in his perfectly ordered test, shocking Claude. Mash continues passing the test, effortlessly lifting a boulder by subtly sticking his finger underneath to make it float and running across water without hesitation. Claude, struggling to comprehend how Mash hasn't failed yet, initiates the next challenge, a maze. He explains that it's filled with traps and must be completed within 30 minutes. Inside, a girl named Lemon Irvine approaches Mash and asks to join forces. Curious, Mash asks why, and Lemon explains that working together would be more efficient. Agreeing, they proceed together. However, Lemon repeatedly falls into traps, each time pleading for Mash's help. Observing this, Mash questions the efficiency of their teamwork. Growing impatient, he tries to pick up the pace, but Lemon suddenly casts Levios Cuffis, binding Mash's arms and legs with magical cuffs. Apologizing, she confesses that she deceived him because she has a reason to keep him away from the goal. Mash effortlessly breaks free, stating that he also has a reason to pass, then leaves. As Lemon lags behind, a giant sphinx appears. Posing a riddle, a creature walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, and 3 at night. Instead of answering, Lemon attempts to fight back with magic, but the sphinx knocks her wand away, warning that she must solve the riddle. She struggles to think but runs out of time. The sphinx prepares to punish her, and though she initially screams for help, she resigns herself, believing this is her just punishment for deceiving others. Just before the sphinx strikes, Mash suddenly punches it aside, stating that the creature from the riddle cannot exist. Stunned, Lemon asks why he returned. Mash simply replies that if her reason was similar to his, he would feel sorry for her. As time runs out, Lemon realizes they won't reach the goal in time. Claude had recruited Lemon to stop Mash, feeling confident that this would finally be the moment Mash failed. But just as he was relishing his victory, a deep rumbling sound filled the air. The walls of the maze, thick and resistant to all magic, began to crack and shatter. The noise grew louder, spreading through the entire area like an earthquake. Then, without warning, Mash burst through, having punched a direct path straight through every single wall. Gasps filled the room as other students watched in disbelief. Whispers turned into accusations, calling it cheating, demanding that Mash be sent home. The uproar grew, but before the situation could spiral further, Lemon's voice rang out. She demanded they stop, insisting it wasn't Mash's fault. Claude tried to silence her, but she refused, revealing everything. She had deliberately obstructed Mash's path under Claude's orders, promised an easy admission in return. Her family was poor, and she had wanted to pass for their sake. Even though she had worked against him, Mash had still come back to save her. She then, with sudden emotion, claimed that Mash had asked her to marry him. A beat of silence followed before Mash quickly corrected her, explaining that he had only offered to carry her since she was injured. Lemon, misunderstanding his words at the time, had called herself a burden, and Mash, thinking she meant physically, had reassured her he didn't mind. Claude, growing impatient, declared that as the examiner, he had full control over who passed and who failed. He admitted that recruiting Lemon had been a mistake, calling her useless and deciding to fail them both. If they had a problem with it, he challenged them to fight him over it. Mash didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and shattered Claude's wand with his bare hands, making it clear that the examiner had gone too far. Before the situation could escalate, a voice cut through the tension. Headmaster Wahlberg had arrived, silencing everyone with his mere presence. With an air of authority, he announced that the final stage of the entrance exam, the interview, was about to begin. He would personally oversee it. He then instructed Claude to report to his office later before teleporting Mash away to a grand hall. A panel of magic professors sat waiting. Wahlberg wasted no time and asked why Mash had chosen to apply to Easton Magic Academy. Mash's response was simple: he wanted to live in peace with his family. Some professors were unimpressed, but Wahlberg accepted it. He then moved on to the next question, asking if it was true that Mash had risked failing the exam just to save a girl in the maze. When Mash confirmed it, Wahlberg asked why. Mash answered without hesitation, saying he would have regretted it if he hadn't. Wahlberg chuckled, noting that Mash seemed like the type to act before thinking. He pointed out that Mash hadn't even stopped to consider whether the Sphinx might be too strong for him or whether he could actually break the walls. Mash, unfazed, stated that even if he had thought about it, he still would have done the same thing. Wahlberg studied him for a moment, then suggested that Mash only spoke this way because he had yet to face something truly beyond him. He then posed the question: if Mash had to make the same choice while facing him, would he still act so boldly? Without waiting for an answer, Wahlberg activated his magic. The room shifted, power surging through the air. Even the professors recoiled at the sheer force of it. A wave of magic filled the space as Wahlberg performed an ancient spell, transferring the soul of the target's most cherished person into a doll. Regro collapsed to the ground. His soul had been sealed. Wahlberg raised a knife above the doll and calmly explained the stakes. If the blade pierced it, the soul would be lost forever. Mash moved instantly, throwing a punch toward the knife, but it didn't budge. Instead, he injured his arm, the pain shooting through him. Wahlberg watched him closely, waiting to see what he would do next. Mash, undeterred, reached out and grabbed the blade, stopping it from descending. He declared that Wahlberg's magic had limits and that he couldn't maintain the spell forever. This would be a battle of endurance. Wahlberg continued observing him, then spoke. Power, he explained, could be used to help or to harm. It all depended on the wielder. Protecting the weak and regulating the strong was the essence of noblesse oblige. He believed Mash had the potential to uphold this ideal. With that, Wahlberg released the magic and returned Regro's soul. He then acknowledged Mash's earlier hesitation and asked how he would have responded to the challenge. Mash answered that if he had to face Wahlberg, he would simply knock him out with his fists. A hush fell over the professors, many of whom found the statement utterly disrespectful. But Wahlberg only laughed and welcomed Mash to Easton Magic Academy. The first classes began soon after. In one lesson, the professor demonstrated Opti Ars, a spell designed to unlock doors. The students watched intently as the magical technique unfolded. Mash, however, had a simpler solution. He grabbed the lock and broke it open with his bare hands. The professor was furious, scolding him for relying on brute strength instead of magic. Finn, sitting beside Mash, quickly decided that being near him was too dangerous. He resolved to keep his distance. Later, Finn returned to his dormitory, wondering who his new roommate would be. As he reached the room, he noticed something strange: the door was missing. A moment later, Mash appeared behind him, casually holding the door. Finn stared in disbelief as Mash introduced himself. At first, Mash seemed normal, and Finn thought maybe things wouldn't be so bad. But then, Mash began introducing each of his muscles by name, one by one. Finn could only watch in shock, feeling his hopes for a quiet school life quickly slip away. Trying to remain polite, Finn told Mash he could ask him anything. Deep down, he only wanted to get through school without trouble. Mash, however, immediately asked how to become the divine visionary. Finn explained that students needed to collect gold coins, which were awarded based on performance in various tests. Gold, silver, and bronze coins were distributed depending on a student's abilities, but if their grades fell too low, they would be expelled. Mash took in the information and acknowledged that the journey ahead would be brutal. Then, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, he offered Finn a cream puff, Finn hesitated for a moment before accepting it. The first steps of their journey had begun. Mash, always one to make the most of any situation, found himself in another dilemma the next day. He had brought a burdock plant to class, mistaking it for a broom. Finn, incredulous at the mix-up, couldn't help but laugh. Yet, knowing Mash's confusion was genuine, he agreed to lend him a real broom for the lesson. The next day, during class, the teacher explained the basics of broom flying. To make the broom rise, they needed to channel their magic energy into it and command it with the word fly once airborne. They had to mount the broom and regulate the magic to keep it afloat. One by one, the students succeeded, but Mash's broom remained stubbornly still. The class watched as one student mocked Mash, accusing him of slowing everyone down. Frustrated, Mash stomped his foot on the ground. The impact caused his broom to leap into his hands. With a determined expression, he commanded the broom to fly. The student who mocked him was stunned, calling it cheating when the broom took off even before Mash had said the word. But Mash wasn't bothered by the comment. He was more focused on getting things right. The teacher then announced the next part of the lesson, a race to see who could fly the fastest. Upon hearing this, a confident student immediately challenged Mash to a race, insisting that whoever lost would have to obey the winner for the rest of the class. Mash, with his usual calmness, agreed to the race. The student was already at ease, boasting about his experience with broom riding since middle school. Meanwhile, the teacher, still skeptical of Mash's abilities after his earlier display, wondered aloud if he could even manage to ride a broom at all. As the signal for the race was given, Mash did something completely unexpected. In the blink of an eye, he had already finished the race, leaving his challenger standing motionless, still at the starting line. The teacher, wide-eyed, exclaimed that Mash had just set a new world record for speed. The rest of the students, equally amazed, struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Finn, however, knew exactly what had occurred. As soon as the race began, Mash had thrown his broom forward, then leapt after it. Using air resistance to slow his fall, he expertly landed on the broom midair, finishing the race in mere seconds. The student who lost, unable to accept Mash's victory, demanded to be recognized as the true winner. But Mash, feeling a bit sorry for him, decided to drop the bet. The student, still bristling with frustration, was interrupted when Lloyd Cavil stepped in, using his magic to silence the outburst. Lloyd then apologized for his friend's rudeness, signaling the beginning of an uneasy truce. Lloyd, always the smooth talker, introduced himself to Mash and offered friendship. But when Mash overheard the name Spud Cabbage under his breath, it struck a nerve with Lloyd, although he quickly masked his irritation. The teacher, reminding them they were still in class, called for order. As the bell rang for the end of the lesson, Lloyd pulled Mash aside, telling him to meet him after school. After class, Lloyd, no stranger to using force, took his frustration out on his friend, beating him up for not following his orders. Meanwhile, Mash, still processing the events of the day, was left wondering just who Lloyd really was. Finn, sensing Mash's confusion, explained that Lloyd was a continuing student from the middle school division with ties to the Bureau of Magic. His family was high-ranking, and anyone who stood against him would be expelled without question. That afternoon, Mash made some of his beloved cream puffs, taking comfort in the process. He had become fond of making them himself. It was a quiet, satisfying activity. As he sat down to enjoy them, he realized something he had forgotten about his meeting with Lloyd. Back at school, Lloyd was furious. He had been waiting for Mash, but when Mash didn't show up, his anger reached a boiling point. The next day, during a break between classes, Mash found his textbook in tatters. As he pondered how it happened, Lloyd appeared, clearly displeased. He asked why Mash hadn't shown up yesterday, and Mash sheepishly apologized, mentioning that he had been busy making cream puffs. Lloyd, always calculating, had heard that Mash was aiming for the Divine Visionary title, and he seized the opportunity. He claimed that he was good friends with the vice principal and could put in a good word for Mash. Hearing this, Mash was overjoyed this could be his chance to achieve his goal. Eager to please, he began to follow Lloyd's every command, carrying his things, cleaning his shoes, and even offering massages, all in the hopes of gaining favor. But in the midst of his servitude, Mash discovered that another of his textbooks was in bad shape. Desperate, he asked Finn if he could borrow his book. Although Finn tried to gently suggest he find someone else, Mash wasn't listening. He simply sat next to him, thanking Finn for lending him the broom and sharing some cream puffs. Mash smiled, appreciating how nice it was to have a friend like him. Later, Lloyd once again took things too far. He spilled some water on the floor and demanded Mash clean it up. As Mash began his task, Lloyd casually mentioned that he didn't like the teacher and might ask the vice principal to fire her. It was clear that Lloyd was not just a bully, but someone who thought he could get away with anything. Things escalated quickly. Lloyd grew bored of textbooks and decided to take his manipulation further, telling Finn that he wanted him to burn Mash's clothes. Finn, now completely fed up, refused. This only angered Lloyd, who responded by using his magic to force Finn into a humiliating bow. The pressure caused Finn to crash his head onto the floor. Unknowingly, Mash had taken Finn's textbook earlier, and now he was searching for him to return it. When he found Finn, the sight was alarming. Finn was bleeding from the head, his body shaking from the effects of Lloyd's magic. Confused, Mash asked what was going on, and Lloyd smugly explained that he was making Finn apologize. Finn, despite his pain, tried to brush it off, claiming he was fine. But then, through his tears, he admitted the truth: he had messed up his textbooks because he was too scared to disobey Lloyd. Mash had always seen him as a great friend, and that made him feel guilty for not standing up for himself. Lloyd, seeing an opportunity, demanded that Finn apologize to him too. He boasted that he was about to dine with the vice principal and invited Mash to join him, but Mash had had enough. With a swift motion, he walked over to Lloyd, grabbed his head, and slammed it into the ground, stating that Lloyd was the one who needed to apologize. Finn, in shock, feared the worst. He knew Mash would likely be expelled for this. But Mash, who had always been naive about the consequences, wondered if being expelled was really such a big deal. As he stared down at Lloyd's knocked-out form, however, a sinking feeling started to creep in. Maybe this was a mistake. Just then, Vice Principal Farman Kragos appeared. He confirmed that Mash had done something wrong, his voice dripping with disdain. Farman explained that Lloyd's father had entrusted his son to him, and he had witnessed everything. As a result, Farman was going to hold a school conference about the incident, placing the blame on both Mash and Finn. Farman scolded them both, calling them idiots, and lectured them about the rigid social structures at the academy. He emphasized that students with higher social status like Lloyd received special treatment. But Mash, ever the hothead, couldn't hold back. He lunged at Farman, driving his knee straight into his face. "I had to do it," Mash said calmly, as Farman staggered. "You weren't open to reason, so I couldn't help it. I already attacked one person, what's the difference with attacking another?" Farman, enraged, threatened to expel Mash for assault. He activated his magic, Lepiosoga, to intimidate Mash, but the magic was thwarted when Mash cleverly stuck dirt to Farman's face. Farman, confused and flustered, struggled to understand where the dirt came from. Meanwhile, Mash was already digging a hole. With surprising strength, he picked Farman up and unceremoniously tossed him into the hole. "Now I'm burying you," Mash said, his tone nonchalant. "You can expel me anytime, but I can bury you anytime too." As Farman yelled for him to stop, Mash simply continued, burying him deeper into the earth. It seemed Mash had just dug himself into a deeper hole, one that might be hard to climb out of. The next day, Mash found himself summoned to the office of Wahlberg Bygan. As he entered, he was already bracing for whatever reprimand awaited him. Wahlberg, however, wasted no time in cutting straight to the point. He assumed Mash knew why he was there. Mash, ever the simpleton, guessed it was about using the kitchen to make cream puffs without permission. But Wahlberg's response was far more serious than that. He told Mash it was because of the fight with Lloyd, and even more so, because of the incident with Vice Principal Farman. The Bureau of Magic saw these actions as major problems and had sent a formal notice to expel Mash. Wahlberg explained that the Bureau of Magic was the highest legal authority in the country. At the core of this organization were the divine visionaries, elite figures with the power to shape the future of the magic realm. Wahlberg also hinted at the weight of Mash's actions. Lloyd was no ordinary student, but the son of a powerful Bureau official, which made Mash's actions unforgivable in the eyes of many. However, Wahlberg was not like the rest. He saw the current state of the world as unforgivable, a place where those with compassion and care were often at a disadvantage. He burned the expulsion notice right in front of Mash, leaving him in stunned silence. Wahlberg continued to explain that he had taken this position at the academy years ago because he saw few people like Mash, people willing to sacrifice themselves for what they believed in. In his eyes, someone like Mash could one day become a divine visionary, someone who would carefully consider what the people truly needed. Mash, not understanding the full weight of what he was being told, blurted out that he was already aiming to become a divine visionary. Wahlberg's expression softened slightly as he continued explaining that to earn such a title, Mash would need to be the top student at the academy. This would require gathering enough coins through various schoolwork and activities. As Wahlberg explained this, he noticed that Mash was slowly nodding off, overwhelmed by the flood of information. Once Mash had fully passed out from the overload, Wahlberg sighed and gently explained that he would handle the vice principal and the Bureau of Magic's reactions. As Mash was dismissed, Wahlberg reflected on his future. He knew Mash would eventually face even more challenges ahead, but he believed in him perhaps more than anyone else could. Back at school, Mash's reputation had only grown. Despite the chaos he had caused, his defeat of Lloyd and Farman had earned him the acknowledgement of the other students. His actions had resonated with them. Then, Tom Knowles, a prominent student, approached Mash. With a confident grin, Tom invited him to represent Adler Dorm in a duello match, a major event. As Tom spoke, a crowd of girls gathered around him, clearly excited. They whispered eagerly about how he had been last year's duello MVP. Mash, still confused, asked, "What exactly is duello?" Tom explained that it was a game played with brooms, the #1 sport in the magic realm. Mash, still unsure, tried to explain that he couldn't ride a broom, but Tom, persistent as ever, insisted that Mash participate, assuring him the match was the very next day. Mash was left feeling cornered. He couldn't back out of this now. The next day, the big match between Adler Dorm and Lang Dorm began. The atmosphere was electric, and the audience eagerly watched the students take to the air. As the game progressed, however, all eyes shifted to Mash. He wasn't flying. He once again tried to explain, his voice barely audible over the growing murmurs in the crowd. that he didn't know how to ride a broom, but instead of understanding, the audience began to boo him. Objects were thrown in his direction, and whispers spread that Mash wasn't taking the game seriously, that he was just wasting everyone's time. Mash stood there, confused and a bit embarrassed. As Mash stood on the ground, observing the chaos of the duello match, he realized he had no idea how to fly on a broom. Tom, however, came running over to him, insisting that Mash had promised to be number one. Mash, confused and a little overwhelmed, denied making such a promise. Tom, undeterred, began to lecture Mash about the concept of bamboo, explaining that bamboo is strong and adaptable, able to survive any climate. Mash had no idea what Tom was talking about, but then Tom suddenly realized he had never explained the rules of the game. The duo match, it turned out, was a battle for control of the ball in midair, with players using their broomsticks to pass the ball through a ring to score points. No magic was allowed, just pure broom technique. Tom looked at Mash with renewed determination, stating that he had put everything on this game, which is why he had recruited him. Mash was still processing all of this information, but he couldn't back out now. As the match began, things quickly took a turn for the worse. Tom flew up, but was immediately taken down by a player from Langdorm who pretended it was an accident. Tom fell hard, breaking a bone in the process. He tried to call out the player's lack of sportsmanship, but the player was uninterested in anything other than winning. Langdorm quickly took the lead, gaining 40 points over Adler Dorm. Tom, now sidelined and in pain, told Mash that winning wasn't important, but that they needed to give it their all. With Adler Dorm down 2 players and facing a 50-point deficit, the situation was looking grim. Frustrated, Mash grabbed his broom and stood still for a moment. But then, something unexpected happened. Mash jumped, floating in the air to the shock of everyone watching. He wasn't flying like a normal broom rider, though instead he was moving his legs at an incredibly fast pace, creating the illusion that he was airborne. He asked for the ball, and when it was passed to him, everyone wondered what he could possibly do with it from such a distance. What happened next was beyond belief. Mash threw the ball with incredible force, scoring a point, but it didn't stop there. The ball spun back to him, as if it were attached to him by some invisible force. Mash threw it again and again, scoring point after point. In an instant, Adler Dorm had a score of 999 points, leaving Langdorm 60 points far behind. Mash had single-handedly won the game, and Adler Dorm emerged victorious. The crowd was left in stunned silence. Afterward, Tom, who had been cheering Mash on from the sidelines, rushed to him and embraced him. He praised Mash for being like strong bamboo, growing resilient through adversity, and expressed his happiness at how far Mash had come. The team received a silver coin for their victory, and Mash felt a sense of accomplishment, though the oddities of the match still lingered in his mind. Later that night, a student read a newspaper article about the game, mocking Adler Dorm for taking a risk by inviting Mash. The article claimed they will be next. Mash didn't fully understand the meaning of the article, but it seemed clear that the consequences of his actions were far from over. The following day, Tom showed up at Mash's door to take him to duello practice. Mash was not interested though, and Lemon, wanting to study with him, added to the pressure. Mash, tired and not in the mood for either, turned to Finn for help, but Finn pretended to be asleep. Just then, Lance Crown appeared, seemingly intrigued by Mash's growing popularity. Lance, who had ranked first in the entrance exam, offered Mash a chance to have some fun. Despite Mash's reluctance, Lance suggested they all do something that was fun, and then pulled out an ancient bottle, claiming it was a special magical tool. As soon as the bottle was opened, Tom, Lemon, and Finn were sucked into it and trapped inside. Lance told Mash that if he wanted his friends back, he would need to meet him in the forest by the owl hut. Determined to free his friends, Mash set off to find Lance. In the forest, Lance revealed that he was aware Mash was after coins, and showed off 2 silver coins he had won. Tom, who had followed behind, was surprised to learn that only upperclassmen had such coins. The presence of Lance's double-line magic, a rare form of magic that only 1 in 100,000 could use, indicated he was no ordinary student. Lance's cold demeanor and boasting about his superiority left Tom uneasy, but Mash was more focused on getting his friends back. The two quickly agreed to a match, with the stakes being the silver coins. Lance, convinced that Mash was too soft to defeat him, activated his magic to clear the area. As Lance prepared for their battle, Mash attempted to punch him, but Lance quickly used his magic raviol to pin Mash to the ground. Mash, struggling to stand, refused to give up. He proclaimed that he could do plenty even without standing. In an unexpected move, Mash punched the ground beneath him, summoning long roots from the earth. The roots wrapped around Lance's magic, forcing him to jump backward. Mash, now faster and more determined, tried to land another punch, but Lance dodged, surprised by the speed Mash had gained. However, during one of the dodges, Mash managed to knock off Lance's pendant, revealing a picture of a young girl. Mash, ever the clueless one, assumed it was a sign that Lance was a lolcon, only to be corrected by Lance, who revealed that he had a sister complex. Mash returned the pendant, but teased Lance, noting that it wasn't much better. Lance, frustrated by Mash's refusal to acknowledge his superiority, asked him what the most important thing in the world was. Mash, thinking for a moment, guessed Cream Puff's Lance quickly interrupted, insisting he was wrong. After several more attempts at guessing human life, love, freedom, Lance, now angry, finally snapped and told Mash he was missing the obvious answer. When Mash asked Lance the same question, Lance revealed that his little sister was the most important thing in the world to him. Mash, ever the pragmatist, responded that people seem to have different priorities. As the tension escalated, Lance took Mash to a cliff and prepared to drop the bottle, intending to use his magic to speed up its fall. Mash, determined not to lose, took off his shirt and prepared to use his own abilities. With a burst of energy, Mash used a new technique, hamstring magic, followed by a powerful dash, which he called Big Bang Dash. In mere seconds, he was back, holding the bottle in his hands, having saved it from falling. Lance was stunned, unable to believe how fast Mash had moved. He assumed Mash was using some form of physical enhancement magic, but Mash simply shrugged it off and suggested they stop fighting. Mash, in a surprising twist, revealed that the bottle was empty and fake. Lance, realizing that his attempt to test Mash's resolve had been nothing more than a ruse, agreed to stop the conflict. As a parting gesture, Lance handed Mash a silver coin, keeping his word about the bet. Mash, now freed from his earlier obligations, released Tom, Lemon, and Finn from the bottle. But as they began to annoy him, Mash regretted not leaving them inside longer, though he couldn't help but smile at the absurdity of it all. The day was supposed to be peaceful, but things quickly turned chaotic as Mash's life at Easton Magic Academy took another turn. He had recently learned that 5 silver coins were equal to 1 gold coin, and with his 2 silver coins in hand, he was determined to get 28 more to reach his goal of acquiring a gold coin. However, Finn quickly corrected him, stating that he only needed 3 more, not 28. Mash appreciated the clarification, but his mind couldn't help but wonder today had been so peaceful. That is, until Finn remembered they hadn't submitted their potions assignment and started to panic. As they frantically tried to prepare, Lance appeared, smirking at their lack of preparation. He called them slackers, claiming they were ruining the dorm's reputation. Mash, unfazed by Lance's usual pompous attitude, opened his pendant, showing the picture of Lance's sister. The moment the light from the pendant shone, Lance's demeanor shifted. It was as if a part of him had been awestruck by the simple, unspoken bond Mash shared with the photograph of his sister. Lance's usual arrogance faltered for a second, but he quickly regained composure. Lance, now acting as if he were doing them a favor, offered to help with the potions assignment. He presented a mandragora, explaining that if its screams were silenced, it could be used as a universal ingredient in potions. He demonstrated by using his magic quintus, which calmed the mandragora. Finn tried next, but his attempt failed no matter what he did. The mandragora kept screaming. Mash, ever the risk-taker, stepped up and tried his hand at silencing the creature. However, his magic caused the mandragora to grow in size, creating a massive uproar. Finally, with a firm slap, Mash knocked the mandragora out, stating, "I think I silenced it." With the mandragoras finally quiet, Lance showed them how to cut and cook the plant to create a compound. Finn found the process too complicated, but Mash, ever confident in his abilities, followed Lance's steps. However, instead of creating the compound, Mash ended up making a cream puff, much to Lance's surprise. No matter how many times Lance showed him, Mash's concoctions somehow always turned into cream puffs. Lance, frustrated, declared that he wouldn't lose to Mash and explained that his ambition to join the Bureau of Magic drove him to be the best. He wouldn't let someone like Mash, who was equal or better in combat, take away his silver coins. He ordered Mash to try again. As the off-campus class approached, Wahlberg, one of the students, worried about how Mash would fare in the upcoming exercise. Meanwhile, Dot, always overconfident, bumped into 3 students who tried to pick a fight with him. With a swift display of skill, Dot easily defeated them, declaring himself the number 1, and the main character the other students found Dot odd, and as he noticed Mash, he recognized him immediately. Dot declared Mash looked like a side character and started rambling. Just then, Lemon came running, cautioning Mash to be careful and wondering if she could tag along. This only angered Dot, who spat on Mash, claiming he hated guys who got attention from women. Dot had no love life of his own and blamed Mash for ruining the system. Dot had recently decided to join the Bureau of Magic and vowed to rid the world of hot guys. The class began as the teacher explained the task. Both Adler and Lang students would have to work together to exterminate forest scorpions. The challenge was to collect the stones on their foreheads. Most scorpions had bronze stones, but some stronger ones had silver stones. Students who returned with these stones would earn bronze or silver coins. As the teacher gave the signal to begin, Silva Iron, a student from Lang, approached Mash. He insulted Mash, calling him arrogant and claiming he thought he was hot stuff Silva, then attacked Mash, but Mash gave him nothing more than a fierce look. The teacher stopped them, and Silva claimed it was just a harmless joke. Lance warned Mash to not get involved with Silva, explaining that Silva had been known for injuring several students and teachers. Despite his reputation, Silva had magical abilities that had prevented him from being expelled. Mash, distracted by his cream puff, didn't seem fazed by Silva's antics. He checked his pocket to ensure it hadn't been crushed. Lance, however, realized that Mash's fierce look had nothing to do with Silva. It was all about his precious cream puff. As the group ventured into the forest, Lance suggested they work together, but before he could catch up, Mash had already run off. He bumped into Dot again, who was still determined to prove that he was better than Mash. Upon seeing Mash, Dot was struck speechless. He tried to challenge Mash, but was quickly shut down with a slap from Mash. The confrontation was cut short when they heard a scream from a girl being attacked by another student. Without hesitation, Dot rushed to help, defeating the aggressor with Explom and saving the girl, Lauren Cabas. She thanked Dot, but as she did, Dot began to blush, completely melting under her praise. Lauren found Dot's behavior odd, but Dot continued to try and keep his composure, excited by the attention. Lauren, noticing Dot's awkwardness, commented that with her magic, she could make anyone slightly attracted to her fall in love. However, when she turned to Mash and used her magic, it had no effect. She tried even harder, but Mash remained indifferent. Eventually, Dot, still eager to win Lauren's approval, asked her why Silva was stalking her. Lauren, now visibly upset, explained that Silva had been threatening her. Dot, now incensed, vowed to defeat Silva. Silva appeared on the scene, mocking Dot for trying to take him on. He called Dot a loser and relished the chance to knock him down. As Silva attacked, a rock struck Mash's cream puff, knocking it out of his hands. Mash, unbothered by the loss of his snack, looked at Silva with renewed determination. Dot, angry at the mockery, retaliated with machine gun Explom, but Silva effortlessly countered it with his own magic. The battle between Dot and Silva escalated, and as the tension built, Mash's mind wandered to the bigger picture. What kind of world would it be if he allowed people like Silva to walk all over others? Mash didn't need to fight for the same reasons as Dot, but seeing someone like Silva threaten innocent students made him realize that standing up to bullies was always the right thing to do. Dot, still reeling from the intense battle with Silva, was surprised by the overwhelming strength of his opponent. His mind raced as he wondered what he could do to save Lauren from Silva's cruel intentions. Silva, sensing Dot's desperation, decided to give them a chance. He proposed that if Dot could endure 5 hits from his magic, he would leave the girl alone, and as an added incentive, he would even bet 1 silver coin. Dot, stubborn as ever, agreed without hesitation, convinced he could take on 5 hits. However, Silva revealed that Mash would need to endure the same challenge. Dot tried to explain that Mash had nothing to do with it, but Silva wasn't concerned with his reasoning. In a moment of determination, Dot suggested that both he and Mash would endure the 5 hits together. As Dot braced for the first hit, Silva unleashed his iron fist. The force of the blow sent Dot reeling, blood spilling from his mouth, but he stood his ground. With each successive hit, Dot staggered but remained resolute, determined not to break his promise to Lauren. After enduring 9 hits, Dot finally collapsed, his body barely able to stay upright. With his last ounce of strength, Dot called out to Mash, urging him to take Lauren and run. Silva laughed mockingly, calling Dot an idiot for continuing to resist. But as they mocked him, Mash took action. With a calm demeanor, Mash threw a cream puff at Silva's face, shutting him up. "This has gone far enough," Mash declared. "You're a scumbag, and now it's my turn to take on the 10-hit challenge." Elsewhere, Lance, who had been keeping an eye on Mash's progress, wondered how his friend would fare. Finn and Lemon were confident that Mash could handle himself, but Lance warned them of the dangers that lay ahead. He explained that there were different types of magic users at Easton Magic Academy: white mages, who excelled in scholarship and support magic, and reg mages, who were combat specialists. Reg mages were far tougher, especially those who had already completed their first year. Mash would need to be prepared for what was coming. Back in the forest, Silva taunted Mash, calling him a hypocrite for acting tough while being weak. With a snarl, Silva picked Dot up and prepared to slam him into the ground, furious over the damage Dot had caused to his clothes earlier. Just as Silva moved to strike, Mash rushed forward with a powerful punch, but Silva blocked him with an iron wall. "You think you can beat me?" Silva sneered. "I've won 2 gold coins in my first year. Let's see what you've got." The battle between them escalated quickly. Silva attacked with his iron fist magic, but Mash held his ground undeterred. With each hit, Mash grew more focused, his resolve unwavering. He stopped Silva's magic with ease and began preparing his own counterattack, using his triceps magic ballista knuckle. Silva, clearly taken aback by Mash's power, tried to defend himself, but Mash dodged or destroyed his iron barriers, closing the distance between them. Finally, Mash landed a powerful punch to Silva's gut, sending him sprawling to the ground. Silva, stunned and unable to recover, admitted that he couldn't take any more hits. Mash, however, wasn't finished. "That was 2 hits out of the 10 you promised to endure," he said calmly, standing over Silva. Silva, realizing that one more hit might kill him, began to panic. But just as Mash prepared to land another blow, a scorpion appeared on the battlefield. Silva, desperate to escape, saw that the scorpion had a star-shaped stone on its forehead, making it worth more than a silver coin. Hoping to flee while Mash was distracted, Silva made his move. The scorpion charged, but Mash effortlessly blew it away with a single gust of wind. "I'm busy right now," he remarked nonchalantly, leaving Silva frozen in fear. Mash then turned to Lauren, who had been watching the entire exchange. She was shocked at how quickly Silva had been beaten, and in a moment of guilt began to cry. She claimed that Silva had forced her to act the way she had. Mash, seeing through her manipulation, hugged her from behind, pretending to comfort her. But in an instant, he performed a suplex, slamming her to the ground. "I treat everyone equally," he declared. Later, Mash rejoined Lance, Finn, and Lemon. They were all impressed by how he had handled Silva and defeated a star-shaped scorpion, which was worth 2 silver coins. Dot, beaten and bruised but still standing, excitedly thanked Mash for getting involved. "That's not typical for you," Mash remarked, which caused Dot to flush with embarrassment. Lance, sensing the tension, explained that Mash had been targeted by Lang because of his coins. Lang Dorm, made up of the Academy's elite, was hunting coins in order to further their own agenda. Lance went on to explain that the students of Lang were part of a faction known as Lupus, a group that valued noble bloodlines and saw themselves as superior to the students of Adler Dorm. They were determined to keep nobodies like Mash from gaining access to the Bureau of Magic. With 5 silver coins now in his possession, Mash's coins turned into 1 gold coin. At this point, Mash realized that there were different dorms in the academy. Finn reminded him that students were assigned to a dorm when they entered the school. Mash recalled the process. Each student had to touch the skeleton unicorn, which would read their thoughts and assign them based on their characteristics. When Mash's turn came, the unicorn was shocked to find that Mash was thinking only of cream puffs. The unicorn, perplexed by this, assigned Mash to Adler after a long, logical analysis. Lance then explained that Silva was part of Lupus and that Mash should stay away from Lang Dorm to avoid further conflict. The next day, Mash was on his way to class when he encountered a door and couldn't decide whether to push or pull. As he stood there contemplating, Silva, elsewhere, was apologizing to Abel, the leader of Magia Lupus. Silva begged for another chance, but Abel coldly rejected him, explaining that only those with perfect education, overwhelming talent, and noble blood could be chosen to control the world. Silva's failure to meet these criteria made him expendable. In an instant, Abel transformed Silva into a doll. Just as this happened, Nash entered the room, holding the door and still wondering whether he should push or pull. He glanced at the lifeless doll and, without skipping a beat, asked Abel, "Do you know you're talking to a doll?" Mash sat down, carefully writing his letter to Regro and Brad. He was in one of his more contemplative moods, reflecting on the whirlwind of events that had unfolded since he left the comfort of his home. His thoughts drifted to Regro and he quickly wrote, "I hope you're doing alright, Regro, but if you're not, you should definitely eat some cream puffs. That'll make everything better." He chuckled to himself before continuing. Mash explained in the letter how he had recently taken the Academy's entrance exam, a maze-like labyrinth that tested not only his magic but his perseverance and cunning. During the exam, he met a girl named Lemon, who initially wanted to team up with him, but things quickly soured when she betrayed him. Apparently, she had her own reasons for stopping him. Still, Mash couldn't help but feel sympathy for her. After all, her reasons might have been similar to his own, and so he returned to save her from a sphinx that had nearly caught her. After that, Mash easily navigated the rest of the labyrinth and passed the exam without much trouble. However, Regro and Brad were already aware of everything that had happened during the exam. Mash had no idea they had been watching him, but it wasn't much of a surprise. Those two always seemed to know what was going on. Mash continued in his letter, telling Regro and Brad about how he quickly made a friend in Finn, who was later revealed to have been forced into destroying his own textbook by another student, Lloyd Cavil. This eventually led to a confrontation, where Mash took matters into his own hands and defeated both Lloyd and the vice principal, Farman Kragos, who had been supporting Lloyd and even planned to expel Mash for his actions. Regro was undoubtedly shocked to learn that Mash had actually beaten up a teacher in the process. Later, Mash was chosen to play in a duo match by Tom Knowles. The enemy team played dirty, injuring Tom in the process, but Mash, ever the unpredictable force, got serious and somehow managed to lead his team to victory, setting a new high score in the game. It was a moment of fun for Mash, one of many in his school life, but it didn't last. Soon, his friend Finn was captured, and Mash found himself once again forced into action to save him. Brad then recalled the explosion he and Regro had witnessed in the forest. It turned out that the explosion was caused by Lance Crown. Initially, Mash had thought Lance was a bad guy, but after further encounters, Mash discovered that Lance's motivations were far more complicated. Turns out, he had a sister complex. Both Regro and Brad struggled to fully comprehend Mash's explanation, as he had left out a lot of the details. They couldn't understand how things had gotten so complicated so quickly. Mash's circle of friends continued to expand. He made another friend, Dot Barrett, who initially wanted to kill him because Lemon liked him. Regro raised an eyebrow, unsure of whether Dot could really be considered a friend, but Mash simply asked him to wait. Regro was caught off guard when he received a second letter from Mash. This time, Lauren Cabas, who had been involved with Dot, had written a troubling message. She revealed that she was in trouble with Silva Iron, and Dot had decided to step in to help her. However, things quickly turned sour when Silva showed up, and Lauren betrayed Dot, revealing that she was working with Silva all along. They mocked Dot for being an idiot. Determined not to let his friend suffer, Mash decided to take on Silva and Lauren, declaring that he would defeat them both and prove that they couldn't handle 10 hits from him. The result was inevitable. Mash easily overwhelmed both Silva and Lauren, forcing them to admit defeat. Dot, deeply grateful but still embarrassed, thanked Mash for helping him out, though he was still hell-bent on getting rid of Mash once and for all. He apologized for dragging Mash into the situation, but it was clear he was still holding a grudge. Mash simply added a line to his letter C. Regro and Brad both stared at the letter in confusion. What does that even mean? Regro wondered aloud. Despite everything that had happened, Dot still wanted to kill Mash, and they still didn't know if Dot could really be trusted as a friend. Then, Mash recounted the day Lance had told him about Langdorm and Maja Lupus, a powerful faction of students who were all about bloodlines and status. The events at the academy were beginning to take on an even darker tone as Mash learned more about the cutthroat competition between the dorms. But that wasn't the end of Mash's misadventures. Soon after, he found himself hopelessly lost in the school, standing in front of a door, unsure whether to push or pull it. Of course, in true Mash fashion, he accidentally broke the door off its hinges. To his surprise, he found a man inside the room, a strange, mysterious figure who didn't seem to be concerned about the door at all. Mash, still oblivious to the oddity of the situation, asked the man with complete seriousness, "Do you know you're talking to a doll?" Mash's life continued to spiral into the surreal as he found himself at the stronghold of Maja Lupus. It was there that Abel, the leader of the faction, quickly recognized him as the student who had earned a gold coin. Abel, with a cold and calculating demeanor, asked Mash a seemingly simple question: why did he want to become a divine visionary? Mash, ever earnest and direct, explained that his goal was to live peacefully with his family. Abel, however, had a much darker view of the world. He revealed that divine visionaries were more than just powerful individuals, they were vessels for God's divinity. If Mash truly wanted to become one, Abel would reshape the world, returning it to its rightful form. According to him, humanity had flourished not through compassion, but by devouring and using the weak. Now, society was fighting for equality, which Abel saw as an abomination. The law of nature is that the strong devour the weak, he declared, explaining his twisted philosophy. Mash, although understanding the sentiment of wanting peace, was taken aback by Abel's harsh view of the world. "I just want to live in peace," Mash responded, his words sincere but misunderstood by Abel. He thought Mash was being hostile, and tension mounted. To Mash's surprise, Abel agreed to let him go only if he handed over his gold coin. But Mash refused. Without warning, Abel launched an attack using Silva's puppet. Mash easily smashed it to the ground, cutting the cords that bound it and reverting the magic that had turned Silva into a doll. For a brief moment, Mash thought the battle was over. But then another, much larger puppet grabbed him from behind with shocking strength. Mash was caught off guard, unable to move as the puppet threw his gold coin to Abel. As it released Mash, he accidentally stepped on Silva's doll-like body, but decided to take him to the nurse's office, showing his compassion even in the face of danger. Abel, observing Mash's actions, was puzzled. "Are you giving up your coin?" he asked, to which Mash responded that he wasn't giving up the coin. Instead, he was prioritizing Silva's well-being. Despite everything, Mash made it clear that no matter how strong Abel was, he would not lose. As Mash left the stronghold with Silva, Abel felt a gnawing sense that something wasn't quite right. His suspicion grew when he noticed something off about his puppet, a missing button. His suspicion turned into disbelief as he realized the gold coin he had received was the missing button. The revelation came in a flash when Love Cute, a member of Maja Lupus, confessed she had seen Mash rip the button from the puppet's body with his mouth and spit it at such speed that it collided with the coin. Mash then used his lungs to inhale the coin back into his possession. Meanwhile, in the nurse's office, Silva woke up with no memory of anything that had happened since becoming a puppet. He found Mash, who was on the floor exercising. Silva wondered why Mash had gone through so much trouble to bring him there, and Mash, perhaps a bit too honestly, muttered, "When one of us is in trouble, we're all in trouble," before quickly biting his tongue and leaving, unsure how to explain himself further. Back in Adler's room 302, Lance and Dot stared at each other, tension thick in the air. Finn was caught in the middle, wanting them to leave his room, but it was clear the two would never get along. Their animosity grew, and soon it was clear a fight was brewing. But just as the situation reached a boiling point, Mash barged in, once again breaking the door. "If you're going to break something, at least do it outside," Mash grumbled, completely unfazed by the argument. Moments later, Lemon arrived with urgent news. She led them to the magic scale, a device that tracked how many gold coins each dorm had. Lang dorm, she revealed, had accumulated 15 gold coins, while Adler and Orca dorms had only one each. Lang dorm had been systematically stealing coins from the other dorms, and with the upperclassmen away on off-campus internships, there was no one to stop them. It seemed inevitable that Lang dorm would produce the next divine visionary, unless something was done. Mash, Lance, and Dot all agreed to take action. Wolberg, the instructor, needed to reprimand Mash for his actions, though the punishment was mostly for show. Mash was assigned to clean the owl hut for a week. Lance, however, decided to stick by Mash, suspecting that Lang dorm might target him next. As they were making their plans, two Maja Lupus members, Olor Andrew and Answer Shinery, were already en route to confront them and take Mash's gold coin. Olor attacked first, using his sea field magic to create an area of water beneath Mash, causing him to fall. Answer, not one to sit idle, threw a large shuriken at Lance, though Lance easily dodged it. Olor, revealing his sea shark ability, turned into a shark and charged at Mash, but Mash, with his usual brute force, punched him into submission. Answer, meanwhile, continued to attack Lance. But Lance, recognizing Answer's shuriken-based magic, knew he could stop him with his gravity magic, but seeing the owls nearby, Lance hesitated. His little sister's affection for the owls made him unwilling to harm them. Instead, he used his magic to move the owls out of harm's way. The situation escalated when Answer used Shuriken Double, but Lance countered with Graviole, smashing the shurikens into the ground. Realizing that Answer wasn't attacking him because of the owls, Lance's tactics shifted. Answer, frustrated, launched his strongest attack, Large Shuriken, but once again, Lance countered, explaining that those who fight for themselves would never overcome his determination to protect his sister. Meanwhile, Allure, still in his sea field, laughed at Mash's struggles, assuming he would never escape the water. But Mash, who had been training to swim, passed by Allure at a speed so great that it left the Magia Lupus member in disbelief. Mash continued to swim circles around him, faster than Allure could react, and then proceeded to defeat him with ease. With Allure's defeat, Lance took one of his gold coins, sensing that if Magia Lupus members were this strong, they still had a chance. But their victory was short-lived as Abyss Razor, another member of Magia Lupus, appeared. His arrival was swift, and before they could react, he was behind both Mash and Lance. Lance attempted to use Gravile, but his magic failed to activate. Abyss, apologizing for his earlier menacing aura, explained that he was only there to retrieve his allies. Despite Mash's attempts to strike him, Abyss teleported behind Lance in an instant, and with his business finished, he left, promising that they would meet again another day. As Abyss walked away, his mask cracked, revealing his concern. Mash, despite having no magic, had incredible speed, and that, Abyss realized, made him more like him than anyone else, someone without magic, but with overwhelming power. As the tension between the dorms and their rival factions deepened, Rhodes Eamus, the Magma Master from Orca Dorm, found himself facing off against Abyss Razor, the enigmatic Magia Lupus member. Although Rhodes was known for his fiery aggression, Abyss had heard enough to know that he wouldn't be a problem. Without breaking a sweat, Abyss dispatched Rhodes and took his gold coin, adding to his collection as his cold eyes scanned the aftermath. Rhodes may have been strong, but he was no match for Abyss's quiet menace and ruthless efficiency. Back in Adler, Lance tried to get a sense of their next move. Magia Lupus has some strong members, and we can't just wait to be attacked, he explained. But the school keeps dorm locations secret to encourage inter-dorm competition. We need to find their dorm and take their coins before they take ours. Mash, however, seemed more focused on his cream puffs than the gravity of the situation. Lance shot him a glance. "Are you even listening?" he asked, exasperated. Mash nodded absently, confirming that he had heard everything, though it was clear his attention was elsewhere. The group's dynamic shifted when Lemon rushed in, urgent and clearly flustered. "There's a problem with Tom," she announced. They followed her to the infirmary, where Tom lay looking drained, his face pale. He had no memory of what had happened, but recalled a strange dream, a dark box, trapping him, suffocating him. To his horror, Tom realized he could barely feel his magical energy, as if it had been sucked from his body. His magic was all but gone. Lemon was visibly shaken as she explained that many students were experiencing the same loss of magic. As a token of reassurance, she handed Mash a lucky charm she'd made, calling it creamy and instructing him to keep it close, even while sleeping. Mash accepted it with a quiet nod, not fully understanding the gravity of the situation but trusting Lemon's judgment. That evening, the group ventured into the dark, navigating the silent halls of the school. Dot and Finn, hesitant but determined, joined them. Dot seeking the gold coins and Finn afraid of being left behind. They soon spotted Lemon walking ahead of them, but Lance sensed something was wrong. A strange unease filled the air, and they quickly realized Lemon wasn't what she seemed. As she turned, her face revealed a hollow, puppet-like emptiness. They followed her, and the pursuit led them to a dead end. Just as Finn and Dot became nervous, Lance used his disclosed magic to reveal a hidden door beneath the floor. Dot tried to blow it open with his magic, but it had no effect. Mash, with his usual unorthodox approach, took a suit of knight's armor and used it to leverage the door open, surprising everyone with his resourcefulness. Beyond the door was an ancient arena, its stone walls worn by time. Shuingetsuku, a member of Langdorm and known as the First Fang, appeared, explaining that this was a long-forgotten place once used for duels. He was here on Third Fang's orders to eliminate intruders like them. In a twisted form of challenge, they had to wager their gold coins if they wished to proceed. Dot, ever the showman, took the bait. With a flourish, he asked Shuin if he had a fan club, and Shuin's confirmation only fueled Dot's jealousy. "I'm living my dream," Dot declared, preparing for a showdown. "I'm going to kill you." The battle began with Shuin wielding his rose whip, a dangerous weapon that seemed to control nature itself. Dot, however, wasn't backing down. He started by using his Explom Bomb, setting traps with magic that would explode with 5 times the usual power. Shuin was confident he could avoid them, but Dot was certain he would fall into his own traps. As the battle escalated, Shuin tried to attack Dot with his rose whip, but found himself ensnared by Dot's bomb, which shredded the whip to pieces. Dot had planned for this moment, activating his remaining bombs, and they exploded in succession, shattering the air and leaving Shuin defeated. But true to Shuin's character, even in defeat, he struck an attractive pose. "What a guy," Dot muttered. Just as they thought the fight was over, the ground beneath them began to sink, and the group found themselves separated, each falling into different rooms. Lance faced off against Worth Madel, who introduced himself as Third Fang from Magia Lupus. Worth made it clear he was more interested in facing Mash, but Lance had to deal with him for now. Dot and Finn were thrown into a room with Love Cute and Milo Genius, the 5th and 4th Fangs. Though Dot was brimming with confidence, Finn seemed to think their fate was sealed when he realized the strength of their opponents. But Dot, undeterred, urged him not to give up. Meanwhile, Mash found himself in a room with Abyss Razor, the 2nd Fang. Having observed Mash's surprising speed and lack of magic, saw a kindred spirit in him. I was impressed by your speed the other day, Abyss remarked, but Mash, ever the optimist, tried to deny what seemed so obvious. Abyss admitted they were alike in many ways, both lacking magic, and perhaps this was why they were here, in this twisted arena, preparing to fight each other. With that, the two warriors steeled themselves for a battle that would test both their physical prowess and their wills to survive. Lance, unwilling to waste any more time, immediately launched his Gravile at Worth, using his gravity magic with precision. Worth, however, was quick on his feet, sinking into the ground with ease and evading Lance's attack. Seconds later, Worth emerged, creating multiple mud copies of himself. Without hesitation, Lance struck them down with his gravity magic, crushing them to pieces. However, Lance's attempt to attack the entire battlefield was futile. Worth appeared behind him, casting Burst, the spell that trapped Lance's legs in mud, immobilizing him. As Lance struggled, Worth approached, assessing his opponent. "You're not bad. Maybe you'd do better if you joined Magia Lupus," Worth suggested, his voice almost mocking. "With them, you could rise. But stay with Adler. You'll always be trash." Lance's refusal came immediately. "From where I'm standing, Worth," he said coldly, "you're the second-rate one." He swung Graviel sideways, attempting to catch Worth off guard. Worth, however, wasn't fazed. He knew that Lance's magic relied on solid surfaces to work effectively. "You won't be able to do anything against me," Worth mused as he cushioned the surrounding environment with mud, absorbing shocks. But Lance wasn't backing down. He suddenly fired rubble from his earlier attack toward the walls, forcing Worth to reveal himself to avoid being hit. Worth, surprised by Lance's adaptation, took a step back. "Maybe you're not as foolish as you look," he muttered, reaching for a potion. The potion, filled with concentrated magical essence stolen from other students, was quickly consumed. Worth's magical power surged. "This is what we're rewarded with in Magia Lupus," he explained, as the potion began to take effect. Worth's magic grew exponentially as he summoned Maduro's 2nd Maduro Devilis, a powerful mud demon. He explained that magic had different tiers: basic, personal, and conditional magic, with 2nd being a tier that only certain double-liners could wield. "I'm worthy," Worth said, his voice full of determination. "You'll never achieve this level of power. You're not fit to rise. You belong with the trash." Lance's eyes narrowed. "I won't let anyone insult my friends." As he spoke, he used Gravile's 2nd torture pole, summoning massive gravitational pillars that surrounded the mud demon, pulling it in all directions. Worth's proudest summon was torn apart as the pillars intensified, ripping the demon into pieces and turning it into nothing more than mud. Worth, his face twisted with disbelief and anger, dropped to his knees. His strongest magic had failed him. He remembered the words of his father: "Even if you join the Bureau, you'll never be worthy." Lance, now standing victorious, picked up a book that had fallen to the ground. Worth's. "What do you think gives someone worth?" Lance asked, his voice soft but pointed. "For my family, Worth was always about position and social standing. It sounds like your family values the same thing. I don't like your attitude, Worth, but I respect the effort you put into everything." With those words, Lance left, his mission complete. He knew that Worth's path, one of insecurity and longing, would ultimately lead him down a dark road. Meanwhile, Mash found himself face to face with Abyss. His speed, amplified by accelerators, allowed Abyss to land multiple cuts on Mash, who was still struggling to keep up. "You don't stand a chance," Abyss taunted, but Mash was unfazed. Abyss then revealed his device, a magical artifact containing Lemon's image, and explained its devastating effect. In 30 minutes, Lemon's magic would be drained, and she would lose her ability to use magic forever. Ash, ever the protector, made it clear he didn't care. "If you're serious, I'll beat you up." Abyss, now convinced that Mash was a real threat, upped his game, using Accelerate's sphere to surround them with a field that slowed Mash down while enhancing Abyss's speed. With each strike, Abyss grew more confident, stabbing Mash in the stomach. But as the sword was embedded in his body, Mash gritted his teeth, refusing to give in. He clenched his muscles, preventing the sword from being pulled out, then headbutted Abyss, shattering his mask in the process. As Abyss stumbled back, Mash stared at his red eye, puzzled. Abyss, still reeling from the blow, explained that his red eye, the evil eye, temporarily disabled the magic of anyone who met its gaze. For years, he had been feared, scorned, and shunned because of it. "There are people in this world who should never have been born," Abyss said bitterly, his voice laced with pain. Mash, empathetic but resolute, countered, "I'm not blessed like you think. I can't understand your pain, but I know that you matter." Abyss responded with cold bitterness, "You have no idea what it's like. One day you'll understand. As long as I have this eye, nothing will ever change between us." He cast Accelerate's 2nd force field, trapping them inside a barrier that made Mash slower while boosting Abyss's speed. Mash, however, wasn't defeated. He slammed the ground, splitting the floor and narrowing Abyss's movement route. Then, with incredible agility, he leapt at Abyss, breaking his sword and landing on his leg to immobilize him. "Got you again," Mash said, before using full muscle magic Hurricane Rush to unleash a flurry of devastating punches that sent Abyss flying out of the field. As the force field shattered, Mash continued his relentless assault. Abyss tried to fight back, but he was no match for Mash's speed and raw power. With each blow, Abyss grew weaker, until ultimately he was defeated. Sitting on the ground, Abyss gazed at Mash, wondering what it would have been like if he had been born normal. He explained the origin of his evil eye, recalling the cruel treatment he had endured as a child. Locked away in a basement cell, his parents had tried to kill him, believing him to be a monster. I was just a tool, Abyss muttered, but I failed Abel Walker's expectations, and now I'm unwanted again. Mash's heart softened. You're probably right. I can't put myself in your shoes. But I can tell you this, you're not worthless. You're not a monster, Abyss, with a final flicker of hope, shook his head. It's impossible. As long as I have this eye, everyone will fear me, even you. Mash offered one last piece of advice. I won't change how I feel about you. No matter what happens, we can still be friends. And by the way, next time, let's have some cream puffs together. With that, Mash left, his resolve unshaken, and Abyss, for the first time in a long while, found himself questioning everything he thought he knew about worth and belonging. Milo, growing frustrated with the situation, decided to leave things to Love. Confidently, she turned to Finn and Dot, asking if they thought she was cute and if they liked her. Dot, while admiring her type, hesitated and explained that he had a fiancée named Lemon and couldn't marry her. Love's demeanor changed in an instant, her playful attitude fading into cold, disdainful anger. She coldly told Dot that since he loved someone else more than her, he could die, and used Tornegas to attack him. Dot responded by using his Explom, blocking the magic with an explosion that rattled the air. Love ranted about how every girl deserved to be cherished, told they were cute, and served. If they couldn't fulfill those expectations, they were worthless in her eyes. She demanded again that they confirm her beauty, but Dot reiterated that he couldn't marry her. She hit him with her magic again, stating that her father had told her she had the right to kill anyone who didn't adore her. Dot, still standing, used his Explom once more, creating a smokescreen and attempting to disarm her by taking her wand. Love, noticing his move, retaliated swiftly, telling him he was too weak to defeat her. She then revealed Milo's plan, the petrification spell that would turn the one who opened the underground door into stone. Milo had been charging the spell for 2 hours, meaning there was only 30 minutes left to defeat her, or Mash would be turned to stone. As Love prepared to strike again, trapping Dot inside a Tornegas cage, a violent tornado surrounded him. Despite the pain, Dot began to reflect on his past. He remembered a time when he had been bullied, forced to trade his new broom for an old one. His sister had stepped in, teaching him the importance of standing up for himself, and how betrayal would hurt a real friend. Dot thought of Mash, who had stood up for him when others mocked him. With a surge of emotion, Dot broke free from Love's cage. His magic, now amplified, shocked Love. She watched in disbelief as Dot used his power to cancel her magic repeatedly. He then attacked with machine gun Explom, purposely missing all shots. He wasn't one to hurt girls, but Love's behavior left him no choice. Love, moved by his restraint, thanked him, but before she could react, a stone head emerged from the ground and attempted to bite Finn. Dot quickly intervened, sacrificing himself to stop the massive stone head, using his bare hands to halt its progress. Just as it seemed they were done for, Milo appeared, disappointed that Love couldn't handle 2 single-liners. He summoned large stone hands to attack, but before they could land, a massive sword cut through the stone, shattering Milo's magic. Milo, taken by surprise, turned to see Rain Ames, the divine visionary who had arrived just in time to stop him. Rain made quick work of Milo's stone head, cutting through it with ease. Milo, realizing he was outclassed, tried to appeal to Rain, confessing his regret for not standing up against his leader. Rain wasn't moved by words, he believed in actions over empty apologies and demonstrated his judgment by delivering a brutal punishment to Milo. Rain then turned to Dot and the others, urging them to leave before he dealt with Milo further. Dot was confused but overheard Finn, who revealed that Rain was his brother. Rain, continuing his investigation, soon felt a strange aura and looked toward Mash, who was emitting an unusual energy, something that wasn't magic at all. Rain decided to investigate further. Using an arachnibus, a creature that could measure true magical power, he attacked Mash with his sword magic, but Mash easily stopped it with 2 fingers. The arachnibus couldn't register any magic, deeming Mash a bug instead of a student. Rain pressed on, launching 3% partisan, but Mash dodged every sword and even made a chair out of them. The arachnibus still detected nothing, and Rain was taken aback. Determined, Rain escalated to 10% partisan, a spell he rarely used against students. The arachnibus, sensing Mash's inevitable defeat, was shocked to see Mash wielding one of Rain's swords like a baseball bat, sending the blades flying with incredible precision. Rain, now intrigued, asked for Mash's name. Upon hearing it, he recalled hearing from Wahlberg that Mash was a unique student, one to watch out for. Rain, now apologetic for his earlier rudeness, offered Mash a magic kerchief to heal his wounds. He surmised that Mash was aiming to challenge Abel, a divine visionary candidate with the most gold coins in the academy. If Mash defeated him, he would be one step closer to his goal. Rain acknowledged that Mash could block Rain's magic, but Abel would be a different challenge. Mash would need to prove he was stronger than any magic user to make his dream a reality. Before leaving, Rain advised Mash to keep fighting for his friends, no matter the cost. He trusted that Mash would push forward to prove that being a divine visionary didn't require magic, it was about being stronger than any mage. Mash, now at a door, wondered whether to push or pull. Opting to push, he accidentally knocked it down, drawing Abel's attention. Inside, Abel stared at him and asked if Mash planned to destroy every door he entered. Mash, slightly embarrassed, apologized, saying it wasn't his intention. The battle for the title of divine visionary was just beginning. Abel stared at Mash, clearly taken aback by his unexpected resilience and strength. He explained that the only student he thought had a chance against Abyss's evil eye was Rain. However, Mash had proved to be quite capable in his own right. Abel, confident in his beliefs, declared that not everyone was equal, and he didn't need the inferior genes of those who took advantage of the kindness of the strong. Mash realized Abel was talking about those without magic, and Abel confirmed it. He planned on disposing of them, believing that simply separating them from society was too merciful. Abel intended to change the rules and eliminate anyone who defended or sheltered them. Mash, reflecting on his own upbringing under Regro, confronted Abel. He stated that such plans were a problem for him, and that they couldn't be friends. Abel, realizing that Mash didn't understand his philosophy, decided to take matters into his own hands and attacked. Love, returning to Abel's side, caught sight of Mash and Abel fighting and quickly hid. As Mash clashed with Abel's dolls, one of them almost splashed him with acid. In retaliation, Mash grabbed the doll's head and threw it like a bowling ball, smashing all the other acidic dolls with precision. Thinking about Abel's claim that the strong could take from the weak, Mash wondered aloud if defeating Abel would mean proving that Abel himself had inferior genes. He then demanded to know where Lemon was. Abel, clueless about Lemon, insisted he only gained his power by taking it from others. Abel then sent 3 clown dolls to fight Mash, but Mash obliterated them with a single punch. He challenged Abel, stating that if he truly believed in his philosophy of strength, then if Mash defeated him, Abel would have to reveal Lemon's location. Abel, undeterred, used his puppet magic to control Mash, forcing him to punch himself, then strangle himself. However, Abel stopped, claiming that it lacked class. He then captured Finn, turning him into a puppet, intending to make the situation more entertaining. Abel warned Mash that if he attacked, he would break Finn, but Mash could break him himself if he wished. As Finn's puppet attacked, Mash remained still. Even though the axe Finn wielded broke upon striking him, Mash continued to stand firm. With determination, Mash retrieved his gold coin and tossed it toward Abel. The coin shot through the air, severing the strings controlling Finn, and returned back to Mash. As Finn returned to normal, Mash apologized for the coin's stubbornness, as it seemed to prefer him. Frustrated, Abel decided to get serious, using his full puppet magic to try and control Mash completely. Mash struggled against the control, and Abel, incredulous, doubted that Mash could resist. But to his surprise, Mash managed to take steps, breaking the threads controlling Abel's fingers. Mash rushed at Abel, landing a powerful knee strike to his face. Abel, shocked, countered by using Marioness Change, transforming Mash into a puppet. Abel congratulated Mash for forcing him to use his spell. As he reached into Mash's pocket to take the gold coin, he was taken aback to find a cream puff instead. In retaliation, Mash punched him and snatched the cream puff, astonished that it had somehow disappeared from his pocket. Abel, still in disbelief, tried to understand how Mash broke his spell, knowing that his magic blocked the brain's electric signals and prevented voluntary movement. After some thought, Abel realized that Mash had moved instinctively, reacting to the threat to protect his cream puff. Determined to end things, Abel activated his strongest magic Marioness second harm puppet, creating a massive doll. He explained that Harm Puppet would turn everything within a 100-meter radius into puppets, with the transformation beginning as soon as the invisible threads touched them. Despite believing Mash to be weak, Abel expressed some respect for him for having forced him to go all out. But to Abel's utter shock, Mash tore through the threads and destroyed the Harm Puppet before the transformation could begin. Abel, flabbergasted, tried attacking again with what remained of his puppet, but Mash quickly smashed it all. In a blur of motion, Mash got behind Abel and performed a Rector Spini magic Hellfall. Grabbing Abel, Mash flipped him into the air and slammed him headfirst into the ground. As Abel lay defeated, he reflected on his past. He thought about his mother, kind and gentle, who had treated commoners equally, but one day she was stabbed while distributing food to the poor. The man who did it claimed it was her comeuppance for always having things easy. This tragedy turned Abel into the person he was today. He believed that those at the bottom of society were there for a reason and should be eliminated, a philosophy he began pursuing by gathering others who felt the same way. Mash, however, disagreed. He told Abel that being a bad person had nothing to do with social status. Abel was adamant that most bad people came from the bottom, and he intended to rid the world of them. Mash found that idea problematic, but he demanded to know where Lemon was. Realizing he had lost, Abel agreed to release the students he had turned into puppets. Mash was relieved to find that Abel, despite his misguided beliefs, wasn't completely beyond redemption. Abel used Marioness Liberation to free Lemon, who was brought out unharmed. Finn, now fully conscious, joined Mash and Lemon in celebrating their victory. Lemon apologized to Mash for her involvement, but expressed her gratitude for his help. Dot crawled over, proudly stating that he had done his part too. The group wondered where Lance was. Meanwhile, Rain stopped Lance, stating that he didn't believe he belonged at the school. Before Lance could respond, Rain attacked, only to have his strike countered. Arachnibus appeared, confirming that its counter had reached its maximum. Lance, undeterred, was surprised at how Rain found him out. Rain revealed his strategy of assuming everyone was guilty until proven innocent. Lance reluctantly dropped his transformation magic, admitting that he had used the face of a student at the school to infiltrate. Rain quickly deduced that Lance was a member of Innocent Zero and demanded to know what he was doing at the school. Lance explained that he was searching for something important to them, something that had eluded Abel. He had no time to waste and intended to dispose of Abel, now deemed useless. Before Rain could act, a large knife appeared in his path. Another figure introduced himself as Jean-Pierre, a serial killer and cannibal who would be Rain's opponent. Rain, knowing how dangerous John was, worried that Mash and the others wouldn't be able to handle him, given that John was on the level of a divine visionary. The fight was far from over. Regro and Brad sat quietly, sipping their tea in the calmness of the afternoon, but both were weighed down by their concerns. Regro was anxious about Mash and whether anyone had discovered his secret, his inability to use magic. Brad, too, felt the pressure, knowing that Mash's future at the school would be in jeopardy if he didn't prove himself as a divine visionary. Meanwhile, Mash, Lemon, Dot, and Finn were celebrating their victory over Abel. Abel and Love watched from a distance, wondering how long they intended to keep celebrating, but before they could react further, Mash stopped and announced he needed to go to the bathroom. It was in that brief moment of absence that Cell wore, the Innocent Zero operative appeared. Without warning, he shoved Lemon, Finn, and Dot aside, making his way toward the wounded Abel. He took in Abel's condition, and with disdain called him pathetic for losing, but thanked him for providing them with useful information about Walburg Beigen. Using his magic, Cell forced Abel to strangle himself, declaring he no longer had use for him. Just as the tension reached its peak, Mash returned with a tray of cream puffs to share. A fly landed on his nose, causing him to sneeze, and he unintentionally threw some cream puffs at Cell. Surprised, Mash calmly asked for them back, but Cell simply tossed them to the ground. This act shocked Mash. The tension was thick in the air, and Cell's eyes narrowed as a headache struck him. The resonance he had been searching for. It was Mash. Realizing that Mash was the person they had been hunting for, Cell momentarily decided to deal with Abel later, focusing on Mash instead. Cell conjured a massive spike ball to attack Mash, but before he could strike, Abyss stepped in front of Abel and took the full brunt of the attack. As the spikes pierced Abyss, he apologized to Mash, saying they wouldn't be able to enjoy the cream puffs after all. Mash, determined, approached Abyss and gently handed him the magical handkerchief, showing him an act of kindness despite the ongoing chaos. Cell, surprised that his attack hadn't been fatal, quickly pieced things together. Mash had thrown a rock just before Cell launched his spell, altering its trajectory. Furious, Mash stomped the ground, sending debris flying, and kicked another rock at Cell. Cell caught the rock effortlessly, unimpressed, but Mash, unwavering, declared that he was taking Abyss to the infirmary and would beat Cell if he tried to stop him. Cell floated into the air, intrigued by Mash's resolve. He revealed that Abyss only had 30 minutes before he was beyond help, challenging Mash to see if he could defeat him in that time. As Cell attacked with his Carbo Rain, creating a rain of sharp carbon spikes, Mash found himself on the defensive, only able to break through the spikes. Abel, watching from the sidelines, thought Mash had no chance. He muttered that Abyss was a fool for trying to protect Abel, but Mash disagreed. He believed Abyss had been happy to help and was content with his purpose. Mash explained that he understood how Abyss must have felt he wanted to save him, just as he would want someone to save him if he were in the same position. Abel, reflecting on his mother's teachings about privilege and empathy, began to question his own beliefs. Abyss, in a quiet moment of recollection, remembered being rejected by his family because of his eye. It was Abel who had given him a sense of purpose, telling him that he could use his eye for a greater cause. Though Abyss feared people would reject Abel, Abel had assured him that it didn't matter if others avoided him, or whether he covered his eye. In his final moments, Abyss urged Abel to run and save himself. Abel, with a melancholic expression, noted that both his mother and Abyss had been noble in their selflessness. Cell, meanwhile, continued his relentless attack on Mash. Dot could see that Mash was getting closer to Cell, but it was still going to take too long. Dot couldn't help him, as he needed to protect Lemon and Finn. Spurred by the delay, Cell summoned Carbo Heavy Rain, an even more intense assault of carbon spikes that slowed Mash further. Abel, unwilling to stand by and watch, summoned his doll to block the attack. He mused that while the strong had the right to take from the weak, it was also the weak's right to oppose the strong, and he was now determined to see what was righteous. Cell, unfazed by Abel's intervention, repeated the Carbo Heavy Rain attack, destroying Abel's doll. He mocked Abel, saying that he couldn't win with such weak magic. However, from the destroyed doll's head, Mash emerged, punching Cell with a force that caught him off guard. Though the punch didn't do much damage due to Cell's carbon epidermis, Cell was intrigued. He asked Mash what kind of magic he used, but Mash simply replied, power. Cell scoffed, unimpressed with the lack of explanation, and revealed the spellflexion mirror, a powerful magical item that could reflect any spell cast its way. Dot recognized the mirror immediately, recalling its fearsome reputation. It was a relic that should have been guarded by the Bureau of Magic. He warned Mash that if he tried to use magic against Cell now, he would die. Dot knew that the only way to defeat the mirror was to avoid using magic, but Mash wasn't known for following the rules. Cell taunted Mash, daring him to attack and fall into ruin. Without hesitation, Mash kicked the spellflection mirror, breaking it into pieces. His friends watched in awe, realizing that Mash hadn't used magic at all. They began to recall previous situations where Mash had seemed to perform feats without magic. It was a revelation. Cell, examining his hand, noticed a symbol appearing where his skin had made contact with Mash. Before he could comprehend what was happening, the space behind him shattered and two enormous hands emerged, grabbing him. With a smirk, Cell introduced himself one final time to Mash as Cell wore, but then, as if remembering something, he excused himself, saying he had an errand to run but that they would meet again. Mash, relieved, was content that Cell was leaving, but he quickly turned his attention back to Abyss. Mash decided they needed to hurry and get Abyss to the infirmary. Abel, however, explained that Abyss's condition had stabilized thanks to the magical handkerchief Mash had given him. He thanked Mash for his kindness and promised to return the favor. As Mash's friends expressed their astonishment that he didn't use magic, they also became concerned about the consequences. If anyone found out, Mash could be expelled from the school. Mash, ever the optimist, simply smiled and said, "I can use magic." His friends, perplexed but understanding, decided to keep his secret safe. Dot, however, still worried that if they protected Mash and the truth came out, they too could be expelled. One of the students that Abel had captured earlier regained consciousness. He overheard the conversation and threatened to tell the teachers everything. Mash, however, remained remarkably calm and unfazed by the impending exposure. His friends, puzzled by his reaction, wondered what he would do now. Without a word, Mash simply took a bite of a cream puff. At Innocent Zero, Cell returned to report to his superiors. He announced that he had found what they were searching for. Innocent Zero, eager and confident, noted that his wish was finally within reach. He instructed Cell to retrieve it, knowing that their plans were now one step closer to fruition. Thanks for joining me on this adventure. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more epic content. Let me know what you think in the comments, and don't miss out on the next video. There's always more fun, surprises, and challenges ahead. Until next time, stay awesome and keep exploring.